pretty quickly. It's not more than a week, could be a few days, and we'll have this presentation on our website, just to let you know. I'm Maria Solster. I'm an outreach specialist at the Lindner Center of Hope, and I go out and grow the awareness for all the treatment that we do. And just to tell you a little bit about the Lindner Center, we're going on 17 years old. We have a lot of treatment that we offer there. We have 80 beds. We work with adolescents and adults, from inpatient to partial hospitalization to IOP, which is intensive outpatient, to a full outpatient practice. We work with adolescents where we have what's called a PHP, is partial hospitalization program. We also work with neuromodulation, which is ECT and TMS for treatment-resistant depression. We have a full eating disorders continuum of care. We also have residential treatment for 18 and over. So if there's something that I can ever help you with, don't hesitate. I'll make sure I have some cards on the back table. And tonight, I want to make sure I introduce you, but we're here for the topic, financial psychology. Let's talk about money, psychology of finances and practical considerations, empowering wellness-focused financial decisions. Dr. Anna Guerdjikova is a PhD, LISW, CCRC Director of Administrative Services with our Harold C. Schott Foundation Eating Disorders Program. And I know Dr. Guerdjikova also works on research as well at the Lindner Center. So wears some different hats. So please help me welcome Dr. Anna Guerdjikova.
Thank you, everyone who made it. I do appreciate you guys being here because the said presentation. Appreciate everybody online. I would really like to keep this open and informal, and any questions, anything that you want to share or talk about, please chime in to make this more interactive and useful for the audience. This topic is slightly unusual. I don't know if you guys follow our kind of roster, the Lindner Center of Hope, and things that we present on and things that we would like to inform the community about. This is a topic that is, to be deadly honest with you, a little out of my comfort zone. This is a difficult topic in general in psychology, let alone for a public presentation for a person who has absolutely nothing to do with finance. Math was my worst subject in school. I do not like it to this day. So bear with me here. Hopefully we're going to be able to muddle through this together. So what are we going to be doing today? Talk a little bit about the psychological factors in financial behavior. There's common financial biases. This is a very interesting subject in behavior psychology. There's some strategies for things that we all can maybe think about doing or considering to maybe change in our personal lives related to the psychology and kind of the brain functioning behind, our decisions related to money. And then I really hope to make this interactive, again, with the audience that is online and all of you guys here. Do you guys want to just tell me why you decided to come today? I mean, what got you interested or like anything?
I love money.
Okay, all right.
I like to hear how people, how they see it
Okay,
and how it influences life and choices.
excellent.
I thought you could teach me something I don't know.
Okay, so I wanted to actually, I was thinking driving here, I want to preface
Careful not to follow.
Okay, to preface by saying that I'm not going to make you rich. I don't know how to do this, this is not about like money and like, market and things. This is about kind of our thinking, the psychology behind those choices. So if I knew how to make everyone rich, we would not be here. So, but I've done a lot of reading and hopefully, I will help you kind of process some of these ideas. All right. So those are the learning objectives, that were official. Actually, what are my intentions for today and why I decided to try this topic is I would like to demystify money. I think we all have our biases, fears, things that we really don't kind of talk about. And sometimes money is one of those subjects. It depends on the family where you were raised, in your values, a lot of things. But money tends to be one of those kind of taboo topics, at least from what I've seen with my patients. One of the reasons I started reading on money is that a lot of adults that I see, actually adolescents as well, we sooner or later get to the topic of money in some capacity, like, people cannot afford to pay for treatment, things are concerned about, their parents not being concerned about not being able to make the ends meet, adults being worried about their elderly parents that cannot afford nursing homes. So, in some shape or form, money's everywhere in our lives. I would like for us to start seeing money as a tool or something a skill, something that we can work on, we can master. So get out of here empowered that, we kind of rule money and money doesn't rule us type of thing. It is never too early or too late to start to learn about money. I'm, an example of this. I started reading about this in my late 40s. Because I realized that I just have a lot of years and there are a lot of things that I don't know and I continue to fear even more because I don't know. You really do not need to understand math to understand money. As I put down here, you need literally 4th grade math and maybe some very basic Excel skills to be able to understand this information, to be able to handle your own money. However, compassion to yourself is crucial. To kind of allow yourself to not know and to literally be like, I don't know what those words even mean, and having to Google things that you do not understand. I come from a different culture, from a completely different country, the other end of the world, where, for example, everything was cash. I was introduced to the concept of credit cards in my mid-20s here. So, again, we all have a lot of things to learn. We come from very different backgrounds. At the end of the day, though, it all boils down to values. So my hope was to help all of us understand this idea that, we all deal with money in our everyday lives, and the way we handle money really depends on kind of our goals and our values and what are we bringing to the table. Money is just a tool. You can make $3 million, if you spend $3.2 million, you're still going to have less money than a person who makes, 30 grand but spends 25 grand, for example. So, it really gets down to skills and values rather than the money itself. So that's the intention, to hopefully demystify it and make all of us kind of less intimidated and less scared. The reason again why this presentation is part of Lindner's Full Community Education Series is related to the fact that money is one of the top stressors in our society. According to the APA Stress in America survey, money has consistently ranked as one of the top stressors. Recently, just like 2 years ago, raising inflation costs to our everyday lives was so pronounced that roughly 2/3 of Americans report money as a significant stress factor. So if you think about it, 2/3 of the population identifies money or money issues as one of their top stressors. About 60% of American adults live paycheck to paycheck, meaning that any unexpected expense of any kind. You have a car breaking down, you have a sick kid, you have a sick pet. I'm actually treating a patient who had to spend over $3,000 for a cat care. This is a lot of money, and the cat is a member of the family, so you cannot say, sorry. She had to, get money out of her emergency fund to do all sorts of, things to fix this situation. This is very stressful for a person who is dealing with chronic mental illness. An added stressor like this can really be detrimental. Here I have the example that about 60% of Americans cannot cover an unexpended $1,000 expense with savings alone. So, going back to my patient with a cat, this is, a true story, a person who really has this expense that is coming and that you need to find a way to handle, which is a very practical matter. You need to find the money and, need to find a way to cover your credit card bill, but you also need to deal with the emotions and how, this is affecting your ability to function and your ability to handle stress. Time is currency you can only spend once, so be careful how you spend it. This is the preface to the next slide, which talks about the fact that, we all have heard the saying that time is money. However, the opposite is true as well. Money is time as well. So my little example here is like Johnny spends Johnny spends $300 on sneakers. That this person actually spends 25 hours of his life to actually make this $300, right? This
He lives at home, right? He lives at home.
Okay, yes. This actually is somewhat very vaguely based on my now 19-year-old son who started working, and this kid worked for a month and then went to the mall and spent literally his whole paycheck on a pair of sneakers, and we were like, oh my God, that's a lot of money, but what can you say? He made the money, he spent the money, but you're right, he's living at home and he has someone to cover his bills and his food. But this is when we started to talk about the idea that, hey, you spend a month of your life, for those sneakers, is it worth it? Of course, for a 19-year-old, 16 at the time, it is worth it because, the pair was so great and there were colors and it was awesome. But, as we get older, you start to think about, I'm spending all that money on something which actually translates into time. I cannot have this time back because time is the only currency that we cannot get back. Money, in some shape or form, we can. We can Uber, we can work for Amazon, we can clean people's houses. There are ways to make money. However, time we cannot get back. And I'm not talking about money, to cover expenses here and, everyday life. This is more so, money that you choose to spend frivolously on things that, we feel make our lives better, like the sneakers, for example. So when you think about, okay, I spent a whole month, working at that store at the mall, and that really translates into just these pair of sneakers, and you're 50, which is kind of, is it really worth it if you have other sneakers, of course. So reckless spending, you get to the question of, does this really mean that I'm wasting my life, right? I mean, if I spend money recklessly on a bunch of things, every weekend, clothes, anything out there that I don't really need, does this mean that, I'm working this week to make the money, wasting the time, and then wasting the money can be translated into the thought that, okay, this is like really wasting my life. And the opposite being that stable money habits really are allowing us to spend the time the way we like to spend it. If you're a person for whom having the new sneakers is a very high value and you make for the money, you buy the sneakers, you are good to go. This is the thing that really makes you happy and fits with your values. However, if you're a person who, let's say, would like to donate to charity or would like to travel, if you end up spending the money on sneakers, you're constantly going to be unhappy because you do not have the money left over to spend on charity or travel. Does this idea kind of resonate with people, or is it a little too far-fetched? Okay.
It makes sense.
Okay, all right. It takes a moment to really, because this does not really relate to our jobs, because we need jobs to make a living, right? I mean, we need a paycheck to be paying the bills and mortgage and all that. We're talking beyond that. I didn't put this piece of data here because it's outdated and I'm not sure if I have new data. But years ago, I read this article that said that an American household needs around $80,000, here in the middle where we are, to cover basic expenses. This was, let's say, 5 years ago. Anything beyond that increases your quality of life just a tiny little bit. So if you make little extra money and you can allow a fancy restaurant or a better vacation, this makes you happier, but just that little bit. After that, it is not changing our quality of life or our happiness. So beyond certain points, the money that we're making are actually not helping us live better lives. However, they are most probably related to spending more time at work and being, busy more, so we're not able to do the other things that we want to do. So this idea that, if I win the lottery, I'm going to be rich and happy really is not covered by science. There's information about lottery winners, how they really are not much happier. Actually, a lot of them are not the opposite because, they get into all sorts of trouble because of the extra money they're getting and they don't know how to handle it. So money does not buy happiness. We know that. However, one of the reasons why might be through the idea of time, because it's not renewable as a resource. So where do we start this conversation? We are surrounded by a lot of information, a lot of myths about money, and just some of them are like, you know, you need a lot of money to start investing. I bet, you know, probably some of you have heard this. For sure, this is what I thought. I mean, honestly, I thought that, you know, investing is just for people who have extra money or they know what to do. That is always bad. Stocks are no different than gambling. Financial planning is only for the wealthy or older individuals. Are any of those statements kind of sounding like things you guys have heard? Okay, can you think of anything else? I mean, the last one I heard a lot from people, you know, I barely make it month-to-month financial literacy, not from me, right? I mean, this is something that I believe you need something to be learning and to be working with. I don't have anything left at the end of the month, so why do I need to know about it? So we are living, you know, in this landscape, hearing those things, and in a regular, you know, household where you make enough to make the ends meet and maybe can live with savings, it's like, you know, it's really not a topic that concerns me. It's like, you know, not something that I need to be thinking about because I'm somehow making it work, and that's it. Which puts us unfortunately into this cycle of, you know, kind of month to month and feeling very afraid of the conversation about money. Here we go. Now, this is a very interesting experiment that, you know, I read online, and I'm not sure if it's going to work out, but I'm going to try it on you guys. So take a piece of paper, write down at least the last 4 digits of your phone number. Okay. Now you think, what is the total number of doctors in Cincinnati? Is it more or less than this number? It's a completely random question. You know, doctors in Cincinnati is completely random question. Think about it for a second and just write it down. Do you think more or less? Okay. And then the final question is, what do you think is the actual number of doctors in Cincinnati? Okay, I'm going to just pick on a person. Maria, did you do that too? Okay. So what's the 4 digits of your number?
7849.
Okay. What do you think? Okay, 7. It is the same. I need to read through this because it was like 2 really good. Okay, anyway, I cannot really open this here with the explanation of it, but the idea is that, you know, you are influenced by a number and then you are asked to make another judgment for something completely unrelated. And then depending on if the number is larger than 7,000 or less than 7,000, people do make up the number close to it. So if, let's say, your phone number ends up in like 2020, chances are you're going to say that they are just, you know, 2,500 doctors in Cincinnati. But in actuality, you might know that there are like 30,000. So, you know, we're so influenced by this immediate question and immediate number. Yes. Go ahead.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. So influenced by the immediate question and immediate number that pops out in our minds, that we make some suggestions for some conclusions that really have nothing to do with like rational thinking. And I can send, you know, the explanation if you guys are interested in reading about it. But I did it, and with my phone number, and it was like literally like, whoa, which makes you think, you know, how gullible we are, right? I mean, you hear something, you immediately make something up without basing it on data. Now let's see. Mental frameworks. So we all come from families with various ideas about money. We were taught different things. And those scripts that, you know, come from our childhood or culture, social environment tend to stay with us for a very long time. And a lot of them are really very unreasonable and really make no sense when you think about them as an adult. I'm going to ask you guys to just take literally 2 seconds to think of stuff that you have heard as kids about money or like young adults that, you know, now when you think about it, you're like, you know, really, this doesn't make much sense, or something that's been in your head and you're going by those principles without even knowing why. Anyone just want to chime in with anything? So money doesn't grow on trees, right? I'm sure you, I mean, I tell my kids all the time. You just kind of right, you know, they don't, but what question is, what's the message that we give the kids with that? What do we tell them? Because, you know, we as parents work very hard for the money. And what does that tell the kids?
There's a finite amount of money.
Hmm?
There's a finite amount of.
Correct, okay. But when a kid says, you know, I want the new Nintendo, and you're like, money doesn't grow on trees, what's the message?
Maybe lack. We don't have.
Exactly, that, you know, you're asking for something that's unreasonable, again, we don't have money for this, again, so zip it, right? And a lot of the times, you know, those are the messages that we internalize in different ways, and they change the way we see money as adults. So some inherited beliefs or money scripts. Money is the root of all evil. That might lead to guilt about earning or spending, causing under-earning or avoidance of building wealth, you know. So you see that this goes both ways, right? I mean, it's not like, you know, if you say money is the root of all evil, you're teaching this person or this kid in your family that, you know, you should have higher values, or, you know, you should save more, or you should not save more. It goes both ways depending on how they interpret it. More money equals more happiness. This can, you know, drive us, all of us kids, to work more, or to, you know, think that, you know, money is really the only thing that matters. Overshadowing other aspects of well-being. It's impolite to talk about money. How many of you have you guys been raised with this message? I mean, I was, for sure. I mean, this was not something that, you know, we talk about. Which limits financial literacy and really does not like allow kids to ask questions or make us feel like, makes us as adults feel that we should know all the answers. You must always save for a rainy day, which is not a bad advice. However, you know, if this is kind of the only thing that you have seen, you are not learning how to enjoy money or how to live your values, because you're saving and, you know, we've all read the stories about, you know, a person who, you know, dies in misery, that, you know, they have like $5 million somewhere. So money scripts, yeah, those are things that, you know, we were told as kids, and then, you know, one way or another, we are like internalizing, and unfortunately, or fortunately sometimes, translating into our own lives and financial decisions. Unless you spend the time to think through those and be aware of those messages, we will continue to use them as kind of, you know, some sort of truth that's given and it's there, and continue to live our lives without intention in the regard of money. You know, if you start questioning, if you actually ask the questions of what does this mean, you know, then you can see how it fits your values. Some other examples of, you know, cultural things. There are certain cultures that emphasize supporting extended family members. You know, this is very true for, you know, Asian countries. People there are expected to take care of their, you know, relatives for generations. And then, you know, share income with those relatives, and this is what is considered normal. So as, you know, some of those people get older and they face all the financial challenges that, you know, people here face, you know, we have to think about colleges, we have to think about our own retirement. It can create a very big discomfort and, you know, really big distress for this person of how am I going to do my retirement, kids' college, and, you know, completely, you know, support, for example, my parents. Another example, you know, keeping with the Joneses, we all have, you know, examples of this in our lives. If you have grown up in a neighborhood where family stay to drive in cars, people are dressed up a certain way, then you get the script in your mind that this is what is normal, you know, this is what is expected. And if you then happen to go to a local university or, you know, mingle with friends who are from different neighborhoods, from different cities, from different cultures. This might seem like you're not really, you're confused, you don't know what is normal. If discussing money is taboo, you probably are not a person who had the chance to learn about money or financial education is something that is a new thing in Ohio. We actually worked on voting this as part of like public school curriculum maybe 6 or 7 years ago. It was not part of kids' education at all. So, children do know how to do trigonometry. They can, probably tell you very sophisticated truths about geography, but they have zero idea of, how to handle like even a very simple budget. Hopefully this is changing, but it still remains, our responsibilities to make sure that we address this in one way or another. Again, for the only reason that this kid is going to grow into an adult, and unless they do have the skills of how to handle this is going to be a source of stress for them. There is a test that we cannot do right now, but you guys have it in your handout. It is called $100 Financial Coaching. This is the website. It's a test that's probably like, 12, 13 questions that will give you an idea of kind of your financial habits and what type of spender or saver you are. It might be helpful to it's fun. I mean, it takes like 3 minutes to do. Might be helpful to do is to just get an idea of, kind of where you are on the spectrum. I wanted to stress out that no one is immune to the money script. So no matter how sophisticated we are and how we think, we know it all, we all have those messages kind of, engraved in our brains. And our jobs are to really identify what those scripts are, see which we agree with and which we don't agree with as adults, and then challenge the ones that we really disagree with. There are no right or wrong scripts, so it all boils down to your personal values. If you would like to donate to charity, this is as good as you wanting to drive a red Tesla, as good as you wanting to never work and be a surfer in Australia, right? I mean, all those values are equally valid, and they are what they are. There's no judgment. Important things is that they meet the life that you're living, the way you're handling money matches your internal values. If you're a person who really, really wants to be a skier in Japan, but you are stuck working in Chipotle, you might continue to have the personal dissonance of, there's something that is not right here. That's why exploring the values is so important, and is really the subject of psychology, why we're having this talk here. The financial stuff is really the way we are tricked around money, or we are subjected to this phenomenon of learning how to understand the cultural context related to money is everywhere. There are a few examples here about, how stores trick us, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard about those things. Probably you have at least, felt it. How your store and the way it is ordered and where everything is, and then you walk in and everything is all over the place and it's messed up. I cannot be the only one who has issues with that. I mean, I literally had to walk out of my Aldi like 2 months ago because it's like, I knew where things were and I walked in and nothing was where it was supposed to be. It was so overwhelming. I'm like, nope, I'm doing this. I had to go back because I had to grocery shopping eventually. But this is how we are surrounded by this everywhere. Regarding the stores, they do this, they change the layout, so they confuse you and you do buy things that, you normally would never be buying. Stores are sometimes or often designed to guide you through fast, high margin or seasonal items. So, even if you absolutely do not need a new Santa Claus or, new Easter bunnies, when you walk, if they're right there and, they're on sale, of course, you have the feeling new Easter bunnies that you absolutely do not need. There's strategic product placement. They put things on on the eye level. There was interesting research showing how they put like kitty stuff, like things that are, kids would grab like lower, so dollars and your kids can see them. Anchoring the sale prices, showing a high original price next to a discounted one. This was one of my favorite. Again, we're coming from a different culture, so when we came many years ago and went to the mall, and you see this skirt that is like $600 and it's super discounted. We were like, what? Well, it was, 900 and now it's 600. So it's like great. And, $600 is enormous amount of money for, any piece of clothing. But, when you see from 900 to 600, you're like, yay. At least the brain says, that's great. The brain does not go back to check and say, hey, $600 is still like, ridiculous amount of money. That's the idea of, the so-called sales that we need to learn to check carefully. Then psychological pricing, you probably know this, like $9.99 is better than 10 or $10, $12. The limited time offers, when they make you feel that that's it, you can buy this vitamin D just today and then they're going to be gone. No vitamin D in the face of the earth. So with our psychology, it's also like, I wanna get it. And then the BOGO deals, and I'm sure, again, that's a very common thing. People end up with two of the things that they really do not need, just because, they're two for the price of one. And then you kind of sit with those two Hawaiian breads that nobody eats, and you're like, hey, what do I do with this? Well, it was on sale. Bringing your attention to this, that, we are all very gullible, we are all subject to those tricks. However, it helps, awareness is helpful, and some tricks that I'm going to show you at the end might help with how to moderate this. We are all doing it, we're all going to continue to do it because we're human beings, but having a little bit of awareness helps to develop the habits of how to critically look at that. The field of behavior finance is a very interesting field that was developed years ago when people who work with money and in economics figured out that the math that they have in their minds that makes sense mathematically is not how humans behave. So, things that are very logical from mathematics standpoint, from economic standpoint, is not what ends up happening in human behavior and in like real life economy. So this is how behavior, the whole field actually, behavior finance started. That's a whole field, people have degrees in this. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention related to the cognitive biases that we have, which is kind of the basis of this field. Cognitive biases are systematic mental shortcuts or errors in our thinking. So things that, we think are right, but they actually are not factually. So knowing that they exist helps us be aware and maybe catch ourselves and avoid making mistakes. I'm going to go through some of those real quick. Overconfidence bias is something that is common. Tendency to overestimate skills or knowledge, leading to excessively risky investments or failure to diversify. This is particularly related to the market, but it can be related to really every decision that we make. Like, for example, if one sees like a success in picking a stock and, the stock goes up, and I mean, kids do that all the time, right? They hear about like, something new and everybody's making money and they kind of buy it. And because, they think they're going to make really great money, they become this stock pricing genius because the price is up. They're overconfident. They put a lot of money in it. And then there is a dip because there is going to be a dip and they are hit hard. However, they sometimes continue to invest in that because, they're thinking, okay, I know more, I know something that other people don't know. Form of bias, just be aware that, having information, always checking the facts can be helpful. Loss aversion, hanging on for dear life. A lot of, I made this mistake, sometimes when you buy something and you don't want to admit that it was a wrong decision and you're holding on to it until it is very late and then you've lost a lot of money. Again, the important thing is to make sure that you learn how to cut losses and to accept that early and to accept that, sometimes we mess up. Another cognitive bias is the confirmation bias. I do have this an example from my personal family. My 14-year-old child decided he's going to become a famous investor and make a lot of money overnight because, it's an easy way. And why do you even go to work when I can make this money? His buddies made some very minor research, whatever, decided that they will invest in a stock. And then they joined forums and, Instagrams and like all sorts of things that continue to feed them with information that, this is going to be great. And there's no way to show him that this is wrong because, all the information that, that when you join one of those little things, you get bombarded with a lot of other things that are exactly from the same group. So it's really very hard, it's very difficult to compromise. And then every time, the stock goes up slightly, they say, oh, see, I'm absolutely the smartest. I told you I would make money. And when there is a dip, we're closing our eyes and we're saying, okay, no, this cannot be happening. So just something else to be aware of. The last one is anchoring. This is when you rely on the first piece of information that we have, and you just claim to a price, can be, stock price, it can be related to other things that we buy. So those biases, have a lot of data behind them, a lot of very thorough examples. The bottom line of this is to always be or try to at least be critical when things are too good to be true, because they're never, too good to be true, and to always try to get information from a few places. Like for people who understand like finance, not so much, but do grocery shopping, for example, like most of the people in the audience. I mean, if you go to Kroger bananas for like, $6 a pound, chances are you're not going to go buy them, regardless of how much you eat bananas, because this should not be $6 a pound. So we do develop some critical thinking skills. We have information. For any other financial decision that we make, it is a good idea to also learn to develop those skills. Just critically ask, does this really cost that much? And again, more importantly, how is this changing my life? How is this really benefiting me? Especially when we're talking about, again, purchases that are not related to necessarily everyday life. There are a few big emotions in finance that I wanted to go over real quick. There's fear and greed, there's regret and pride, there's shame and embarrassment. Shame and embarrassment are big because when we are shamed, we kind of close up. When you're afraid that you're not making the right decisions, you don't know what you're doing, you feel like you're messing up, that's it. I mean, you close down, you cannot learn anymore. So the only big advice that I would have, and I would have hope for you, is that you continue to keep an open mind. And if you don't know something, if you mess up, if you have questions, just ask. Because the learning is the only way for us to be able, to not make this mistake the next time around. And there is going to be next time around when you're concerned. The social and cultural influences, so those are topics within themselves. Retail therapy and emotional spending is something that is very common in the Western world. There's a lot of biological data of what happens in our brains when we do shop. The dopamine goes up, exactly the same way it will go up with a text message, or sometimes with alcohol, sometimes with can be drugs, can be pornography, can be all sorts of different things, spike our dopamine. This happens with, so-called retail therapy and emotional spending. This happens to all of us, like, we all overeat, we sometimes drink more than we should. There becomes a problem when you really start to treat the spending as the next thing that is absolutely needed to achieve the dopamine boost, because this can very quickly become a financial problem. Spending can be emotional, like impulsive spending, we call it, can be a sign of mood dysregulation. There are certain mental illnesses that are related to emotional spending as like impulsive spending as a symptom. So this is something we actually ask about. There's the issue of status seeking purchases, keeping up with the peers. The example, my kid and his colorful sneakers. We all do that. Question again is, how is this bringing you closer to your values? Especially if it is something that is expensive and it might throw your budget. It's a good question to think about, how is this really going to get me closer to where I want to be, who I want to be in life. And short-term gratification versus long-term well-being. This is hard. As human beings, we really like to feel well right now, and we don't really care about what will happen in 20 years. However, with money, it is just, slightly different issue, especially when you know that spending immediately brings the dopamine up. Then you end up, having an extra piece of something that you have to take care of in some capacity. And, we all know how cluttered houses can look like. You can possibly buy 700 Easter bunnies. I mean, eventually you end up having too many Easter bunnies if you buy one every time you go. So the clutter is something that increases anxiety, you waste money because you're spending them on the bunnies. Definitely not getting you closer to your goals, which might be more to skiing, I don't know, 6 hours. Go ahead.
I'm wondering why, I haven't heard a word about budgets.
Okay, you will. Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, budgets are coming. The skills, this is kind of, and again, because I really am not here to give financial advice, I'm here to build the story of how money is something that we can learn how to master. The information I'm giving you is to show you how many factors are there that are really not helping us and that we need to learn to acknowledge and to deal with in order to get to the next step, which is the budgeting. There's choice overall, mental accounting, again, other factors, just concepts in psychology. This might feel like very chaotic in terms of presentation. It feels like this because it is. There are so many concepts out there that it was really hard to streamline them into one story. But the story that I'm building is they're just too big of a story. And we are indoctrinated in certain ways from our families, from our society. And learning how to be aware of what is going on is the thing that can push us forward. Going back to values, why do we need money, you guys? I mean, again, if you're not my 16-year-old son with the sneakers, and I'm talking outside of paying the bills and mortgage and like basic needs. Why? What brings you joy with money? Or what gets you closer to your values that's related to money?
Money left over at the end of the month.
Okay, why? You just like to have them?
I do like to have it, but it tells me that I'm living within my means.
Which makes you feel good about your choices, makes you feel in control.
Say,
Safe, okay. Okay, that's a value, that is awesome.
yes.
Anyone, anything? So this is a great example actually of, being able to identify that, if I have money left over, this is contributing to my well-being because I don't worry, right? It decreases my stress. And the opposite is true as well, right? If I end up with too many Easter bunnies, I don't have anything left, and this makes me feel very insecure. It increases my stress. So that's an excellent example of how money, are contributing to living a life closer to your values. Again, whatever the values might be, because for many people, that might not be a value, right? Go ahead.
Extra money gives you the ability to make other people happy.
That's a value, right? It's a value of yours to be, let's say, giving gifts or taking kids some experiences or doing something for others. This again brings us back to values. This is something that is important for you, and then you're using money as a tool to achieve that goal. That's awesome. Okay, so those are like two really excellent examples of how when you're aware of your values and you know what they are. Again, there are no right or wrong values. Whatever they are, they are. But once you identify them, then you can use money as a tool to get it closer. Strategies. So we're getting closer to the budget. Awareness of biases, like educate yourself about common biases and emotions related to money, and watch for them in your own thinking. This happens to all of us, guys. I mean, really, you walk into Costco, again, an example of my own life. For avocados, I walked in Costco with my husband and I said, we're going here to get avocados and we're in and out and done. And $260 later, we still did not have the avocados because I don't know if you guys know, but now they're like $4 more than they used to be. They were $6 now, they're 11. So I'm like, I'm not buying the avocados. but I ended up, spending $160 on, stuff that's very important. And this is literally an example of, okay, full awareness. I mean, we walked into the store just for the darn avocados. And when I looked at the price, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. This is against my values. Nobody's eating avocados. However, I did not turn around and left, which I should have done. And yes, so no matter how, great this sounds on paper, we are all like subjected to this. And it's not the end of the world. I mean, we joked about it. I was kind of pissed at myself, and it's kind of okay, like, we move on. However, you want to kind of, we're not at the place where, this $160 might be, really breaking the budget. However, a lot of times in life we are. And this awareness is really helpful. Nobody's immune to this. We all do it one way or another. Yeah, avocados are really expensive. So what do we do? Self-reflection, identify automatic thoughts and emotions around money that can help work through hidden scripts. Like, for example, some people say, I feel guilty spending over $100 on myself. And this is a person who's very rich. They has enough money, they can't spend $100, but they would never buy anything for themselves. They would spend enormous amount of money on their kids, things that they would need, for example, or presents for others, but couldn't spend money on themselves. This is a therapy question. Question is, why do you feel that you're not worth it to, for that amount of money to spend on you? How do we treat all that with education and exposure? Those are my two favorite tricks for many things in life. So education is really trying to figure out how to get the information that you need. There are many Instagram posts, there's Facebook, there are books, there are many things that you can follow, even if you don't want to sit down and read a book. A great book, by the way, is Psychology of Money. It is on YouTube. On YouTube as an audiobook, and I actually think they have those little clip notes, where in 30 minutes they tell you what the book is all about. This is one of the books that I'm interested in this subject. He talks about those biases there at length. It's an easy read, you don't need math skills or anything to understand it. But it might be helpful to understand the psychology. So that speaking of education, this would be a good resource. Open dialogue about money. So another reason I was interested in this topic is because this is really not talked about a lot for various reasons. People are intimidated, they feel they are not educated enough, they want to say something stupid, they don't want to hurt people's feelings. So this is very reminiscent in my mind to mental illness, right? We all know it is there. We know that every third person is dealing with some sort of mental crisis, or mental illness in their lives. Money, 100% of us are dealing with money in some shape or form. But this is still something that is really not talked about unless you are, an investor or financial person in a very particular environment. So learning how to talk to spouses, kids, partners, financial advisors, colleagues is very helpful. How many of you guys have talked about money, like really honest conversation about money with anyone lately? Go ahead.
My spouse, he'll be retiring in a couple months. So
Okay.
we had some unpleasant discussions.
Unpleasant how?
Well, I can't spend as much as I used to.
Okay. So, honesty about it.
Yes.
That's hard.
Yes.
Going back to the, shame and embarrassment, those feelings are there, quite a bit. Insecurity is there also, because a person will never, yell at anyone for, why are you wasting money with the other person who's secure enough, So going back to the idea that, emotions are there. How many of you guys have talked about, money to your kids? I mean, I don't know, if kids here, yeah, okay. So, tell us more.
I tried to talk to my daughter, who's now 32, about that, putting money aside, spending everything, saving money so that one day she can retire, So I try to instill those concepts in our mind.
Did you? Yeah. How do you guys talk to kids about money? Do you just sit them down and open an Excel spreadsheet, or do you tell them avocados for $11, people, so nobody's eating guacamole ever? Or
You could find a good opportunity because my daughter is about to be 18. And then teenagers, they own the tour of the world. And then whatever you advise to be wrong, boring.
of course,
So actually, I tried to do it unsuccessfully because it is not a computer.
exactly.
They are immortal, invincible.
Of course. Of course. So, you know, one trick that I have around this is actually doing it for them. I have the same issue. I have, you know, a 19, 21-year-old, and those conversations like, poof, you know. So I just very simply opened like both IRA accounts, all of them work, and I made them put a certain amount. And I read about it. I did not make this up, right? I know that's one. I read somewhere people do that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And open an account and now make them whatever part of their paycheck, you know, negotiated after a lot of years of drama to just go there. And once it is there, it's there. They don't see it, they forget about it, and this is when it grows. For example, you know, because I completely hear that they don't want to do this work. Go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, our oldest daughter's 26. She kind of just graduated college, got her first job. And one of the things we did was sit down with her and just did a spreadsheet and actually put her salary in the spreadsheet and then the taxes that will come out. And all of her bills that, you know, she was expecting to pay, but she hadn't gotten into her apartment yet. But it sort of, I think with money, information is power, especially for young people when they can see it. And she thought, okay, if I pay this much for my rent, I buy a new car, I'm gonna be poor and, you know, I'm gonna be stressed out about that, right? And so we put it all down at the end of the day with our 401k contribution, maybe a little bit in an emergency fund and give a little bit away. At the end of the day, it still said $200, you know, she paid all the bills. And then she's upset because she only has $200. So wait a minute, you've done all of these things that most people don't, and you still have $200. Most people have negative $200.
How long did it take you to do this, sir? Sorry to ask you, but this sounds like enormous amount of work that you guys have done.
Well, I mean,
That was not one sitting, was it, or?
yeah, I'm a numbers guy, so that helps that I can, you know, that's kind of what I enjoy, but she had started getting the specifics, you know, of her job, and it's just a simple spreadsheet, and you just kind of work it all the way through, put all her bills in there and subtract it. And, yeah, but having it down, then she can play with it a little bit.
So see, this is fantastic that, when they see it, they're less scared, I guess, you know, when you do it for them. When with older kids is different, 26 is a different level of maturity, right, than like 16-year-old. The reason I'm asking is that I'm just imagining, you know, if you sit down a 16-year-old, that would be a lot of back and forth and a lot of tears and chips and other needs being met, and I don't have time for this now. And just because, you know, their brains are not mature enough to be able to process through this information.
We did similar to what you said you did for your kids a few years back. We have a 22 and a 20-year-old. And we did that little investment account, and they had been saving all their money in their bank account, making nothing. And so they made a few little stock purchases that got hooked on it. And I think if you get them a little bit starting to see how their money can actually work for them a little bit, and then hopefully they don't turn and spend it all once they get out on their own. So
Exactly. Which, you know, for people who, you know, really do not have kids, this is, that's a good skill for all of us, like opening this first spreadsheet on your own and looking at things exactly the way you described it, even as an adult, can be a very intimidating task. For many reasons. Fear is one of them. I mean, you just are like petrified that what if I do the math and you know it's kind of really negative. And a lot of the times it's just easier to be like, okay, I'm spending, I'm paying the bills, you know, IRS is not after me, I must be going to go okay, and finally I'm gonna move on. And 30 years later, you know, turns out that, you know, a lot of things could have been done differently. I have, you know, besides the open dialogue, which is very hard. I mean, this sounds very easy, however, talking to people about money is difficult. The sooner one can start to do that, the better off we are, all of us, because this conversation really is, first of all, important, and second of all, it's relevant to all of us. The second thing is start small experiments, like gradually try to think through habits or things that you want to change and make like little changes and see how that would work out for you. And I have some examples here, towards more practical things. But no matter how much information we have or how we think about things or how smart we are and how much we know about the psychology, unless we actually do something like some sort of step, we're nowhere. So my advice, just in general, in my work with patients, is to think about, what is this kind of tiniest little first thing that you can do. What you did, sir, with the Excel spreadsheet is not a small thing whatsoever. This is all kind of towards kind of building the end goal. I'm talking here about very basic things, like, if you, again, my example, I have a child that works as a server and his room looks like, he's a drug dealer. There's cash everywhere. I mean, literally, $1 bills, $5 bills, and everywhere. It's like, this is literally disrespect. I mean, because he comes from work and then was that, the money from the pockets go somewhere. So a very basic skill, in my household was like, can you please at least count the money and see how much you have? That type of stuff. Now, things to do. Create speed bumps. This is some advice that is given in financial books. Things that you do to give your brain time to process what is going on. So our prefrontal cortex, right, from biological standpoint, is the place where we make rational decisions. Impulsivity is like reptile brain. It is like the first one that kind of starts to shine when you see these bunnies because they look awesome. Now, question is, how do we build time between that spark that says, I need this Easter bunny, and your prefrontal cortex that's going to kick in and say, well, in reality, you have 20 of those, so you really do not need this one. This is the speed bump. So what do you do to give time for your brain to process and be like, I really don't need this right now? The Costco example, I did not do this connection. I should have just left. I mean, avocados are $11. You're here for this. You're not buying them, leave, right? If I had given my brain time to process through this, I would not have spent $150 on all sorts of very important purchases. This is what we want to train ourselves to do. And with like grocery shopping, this is easy. You can actually walk around the store and come back. You can actually go over your shopping cart, which I know a lot of people practice, especially when they shop with like spouses, with men who put all sorts of things in the cart. When you're at the checking, you can actually, at the cashier, you can be like, we really do not need 7 chickens. Maybe take 1 out or something like that. Just, again, give time, give the brain time to process through what is going on. The second one is budget, the thing that you brought up. There are many templates online that you guys can use, ChatGPT or like any of the those artificial intelligence engines that are out there can actually do this for you right now. So you can literally tell ChatGPT, I live in Ohio, I make $1,000, I'm a household of 5, my mortgage is this, tell me what to do with my money. And it gives you all sorts of useful information. So there are things that can be done now that really minimize our input as humans to help us process through this. Budget templates are online everywhere. They do not have to be there. There are some that are very sophisticated. There are some that are very simple, as you know, the one that the gentleman shared with us. Teaching ourselves to do that is a fantastic skill. This is literally a skill. You teach yourself to do this and to check it monthly, for example. This is the goal that I have for my patients to open this file every month. Even if you don't enter the data, just look at it, because this is almost exposure therapy. It decreases your anxiety. You learn how the fields are looking like. You kind of know, the anxiety related to credit card bills, right? That you open it and you're like, oh. So, and this happens because we don't look at this often enough. If you can build a habit of actually looking at the app or the numbers more often, this is what builds awareness. The purpose of the budget is that it helps us face our fears. It is not difficult, it is just a matter of learning that this is there, it's part of our lives, you know, there's no way around it. The more I do it, the more I know about it, the better off we are going to be. Talk about money, as we discussed, the 24-hour rule for small purchases. This is something that actually works for households, so it's a very practical skill. Let's say if you decide to buy a duvet or, I don't know, 3 new pillows, give it 24 hours, because chances are tomorrow you are not going to need the duvet. You might if you do, absolutely. However, in many cases, those really are things that we can just skip. The 48-hour rule for in my shopping cart, you know, for Amazon shoppers and, you know, other shoppers, this works. I treat a number of people with impulsive shopping. I actually make them, even if you buy it, then I have them return it, because there are ways you can, you know, send the stuff out, back when we talk about it, that, you know, whatever you purchased is not really working with your values to increase your quality of life. As you see, all those have the same theme of, you know, giving your prefrontal cortex time to understand what is going on. Not going with your, you know, impulsive brain that says that you need those 7 pillows, but rather giving the brain time to process through all of those. The budget, small purchases, the 24-hour, the 48-hour rule are doing exactly the same thing. This is called the power of pause in psychology as well, when we learn to just kind of stop and give time for our brains to catch up with our emotions. This is really a wonderful skill if we can learn it in many areas of life. It would, you know, decrease conflict. It would allow us to be emotionally more regulated in our relationships, because it gives time for the true you know, for your cortex to kick in. Automate as much as possible. This is true for, you know, people who are learning how to invest or how to save, to do stuff that gets out of your checking account before you even see it. And then you learn to just live with a smaller amount. The money can go into a checking account. It can go into like some sort of, you know, into a savings account, some sort of hidden account that, you know, we don't talk about. It can do investments, many different things. But, you know, idea is like you, when you see the final number, it is after those things are taken out if you have this opportunity. Weekly, where did the money go quest? You know, that's my favorite. It's fantastic if people can get into the habit of doing this, even by just looking at your credit card bill or the app to see what money you have left there. Know how to read your paycheck. You would be surprised how many people actually do not know what those abbreviations mean. So encouraging kids to teaching ourselves to open and understand what things are. Find your good enough that allows you to sleep well at night. So this is really one of the kind of smartest things I can say tonight, is that money is like time. It's never enough, right? I mean, one can never have enough money and never have enough time. When you think about it, you want to, however, figure out a life where you have enough time for the things that are important and you have enough money for the things that are important. Which brings us back to the important part, because you can never have time for everything that you want to do, or money for everything. Question is what is important, what is this priority that really is allowing you to sleep well at night. Your example about feeling safe is wonderful, right? I mean, this is, I'm not going to get the bunnies and the avocados, however, I am going to have this amount that is left at the end of the month, which allows me to, you know, not be stressed out. This is values work. This is a psychological stuff, you know, this very personal, something that has to be done as, you know, self-quest or with a therapist, with a friend, trying to identify what are your important things. What is the thing that makes you really, happy or brings you closer to your values. The final one here was, you know, just learn all those 401, 403s, 475s, and just learn what those things mean. This is not a one-time deal. The thought of, you know, I'm going to sit down and learn this and be done, it doesn't work like that. I mean, you go back and again and check, and please, approach this with self-compassion. Please approach this with the understanding that nobody knows this. And I mean, probably if you're some financial guru, you know, you would. But you know, most regular people, we don't know that. And this is true for all of us. We all need to be humble about it and accept that this is area of life that we literally have to learn, and learn how to handle. Shared humanity. Nobody, not a regular human being knows this. We are all literally all in this together. Now, I would like to kind of wrap up and then open for questions. Be the one to fight the stigma and the taboo. Really, after the presentation tonight, I hope you'll be empowered with the thought that we are all in this battle together. I mean, some of us might be lucky enough to be married or to be living with someone who understands money better, but also be critical. You need to ask, you know, because they might seem like they know it all, they might not. But we all learn. We all need to, the way we learn, I guess, you know, how to drive or, you know, basic skills in life. This is how money should be approached. Is you're not dumb, you're not responsible for not knowing how to deal with it. You're not like, you know, a chicken for being afraid of looking at it, because a lot of us are. Address debt and financial struggles. So facing it usually is the way to start untangling this. Debt can be a very steep slope. It gets out of control very quickly. So again, asking for help here, as it is with the issues related to mental illness that I mentioned, is the key. Talk about inheritance and estate plans. That is a very sticky subject for a lot of people. Elderly parents really don't like to have those conversations. The sandwich generation is terrified that, you know, will be asked to handle it all. There are some books on this. You know, they have funky names like, you know, the death book or something, but you know, they actually walk you through things that you need to put down and have to leave for your kids so they don't walk around from bank to bank looking for passwords. When I talk to people about this and to patients, I always want to phrase it from the angle of care. You know, we love our kids and we want their lives to be good. We are not making their lives better by providing this information. Anything that we can do to make this transition easier for them, maybe we can think about doing. That's very tricky. The estate planning, especially with, again, elderly parents who are, you know, having different sorts of issues after a certain age can be very difficult. Please, again, know you're not alone in this. Many people are dealing with that. So learn financial literacy is a practical skill, not as a moral category. So if you don't know something, just ChatGPT and ask. You're not, you know, don't for not knowing, you just don't know. This is literal practical stuff. Talking to kids about money, finally, one trick that I kind of started to do is for baby showers and for things like that, you know, I am actually printing out a script of how to open a 5 to 9 account for the baby, for example. And literally say, you know, you go to this website, you click here, then that $100 that I'm leaving, you know, as part of this gift, you go and you put it there, and literally like step by step. Which the first time when I made this, everybody was like, you know, what's with her? But actually, you know, that kid invested the money for her baby, and it worked. So now she actually is putting extra money in this account for this baby, and really makes me hopeful that, you know, if we provide them with the tools and they're very like easy. It was a box from Amazon that, you know, I kind of opened and like printed out like 4 pages that said, you know, congratulations, baby's born. And then number 1, you go to Fidelity website, fidelity.com. Number 2, you make an account, username, password. I mean, literally step by step. And she managed to follow the steps and did it, trusted enough, you know, because I provide some data, you know, how much this money will grow. And she did it. So this is just an example of how being super, super practical and super literal can actually be helpful for people. Same can be helpful for friends, you know, to your comment about the budgeting. Some people are just intimidated by this word, you know, when you tell them to budget. They're like, "Oh."
But budget can bring peace of mind.
Absolutely. But you need to sit down with a friend, right? I mean, if you tell them go budget and they're like, oh, then you'll be like, okay, let me show you how to do this, right? Practical things. And it might be intimidating, it might be like kind of, you know, it might be not in my place. You just ask. And if they say, I don't want you to do it, fine. But you know, they actually might appreciate the support. And then request financial help and celebrate wealth or windfalls. Important to also, you know, when you do something that you're proud of, like, you know, my 529 account for the baby, I am sharing it with you. When I spend $260 and stuff that I don't need, I also share it because it is all part of this process of, you know, being open about it and being human about it. You know, I wish I could tell you I walked out of Costco, I didn't. But this is what keeps us all together in this, and you know, hopefully reinforces the message that the more we talk about it, the more we share those experiences, the better off we all going to be. Because going back to this second slide, money is an enormous stressor for us, and handling it can be a stressor. Stressors can contribute for mental health. If there are things that we can do, simple mathematical stuff, you know, it's definitely worth the time. Okay, that's all, you guys. Now questions. Any thoughts, anything? Go ahead.
I am a financial professional. I work with finance company. First thing is sad that I see that many numbers in the bank account of the company when I go to my, and when I see those. But the company that I work for, they moved me to the US 6 years ago. I didn't know at the time about their 401k or anything in the life here. I only came here on vacation to visit Vicky. So starting to live in here has been terrifying to learn how to.
Excellent.
Because even though I am very familiar with the financial topics, every time that I learn something, I realize that I don't know many things. And then how to approach life here, how to get home here. I have two kids that go to college, so.
And you know, this is true for you, it's true for many people who actually are born and raised here, believe it or not. I mean, I share your concern in life because we're kind of the same, you know, in this regard, we work everything, you know, from scratch. But many people don't, literally, they do not know even if they're born and raised here. Especially, you know, some kids from affluent families where everything was given, you know, and they were provided with everything. Those people, they don't know how to. They don't know that at the end of the month, you had to actually pay this off, right? I mean, because it's an allowance that it's not just given. Or when you're given, like in graduate school, I remember I had a friend of mine who wanted to buy a new car, went to Toyota, and they gave her $40,000 loan. A graduate student, a PhD student. I mean, we were $100 a month. Like, how are you going to pay? You know, and she's like, I'm going to buy this Toyota Avalanche. Those they're like, they look like houses just because she likes it. It's like, you know, how are you? I mean, the numbers are not matching, right? But very intelligent person, I mean, PhD students apparently, but you know, skills. This is why a few very basic books can be, you know, very helpful. But also the idea that, you know, you're absolutely not alone. Many people are in this, but few people are brave enough to try to learn, but you know, we are all doing this.
Difficult things. And then I also feels like, everything that I heard, read, or get even an advertising is a trap. Because they are afraid of that, because.
Yeah, the small letters, right, the small font.
Or going to get scammed. Again, I'm not familiar with things in here, so sometimes maybe we just listen some group of.
Absolutely. This is called analysis paralysis, actually, you know, in the financial literature, when there's so much information and you're so afraid of messing up that you just freeze. You're like, you know, I'm not going to do anything because, you know, it can be a problem.
It's Think about your mood.
But it doesn't really matter, that I think the important thing is to think about, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. You need to find a way to handle it in a minute. Because if it's a huge amount, you still, if you don't know how to handle it, it is still not going to use the going to be a mistake. A lot of time people feel you're just taking that money is going to it actually is not. It is exactly the same. If you don't have the skills.
My conclusion is that I'm gonna work until I am 99 or one day after I die.
There was this meme on Facebook that, I made the calculations and, I can retire, if I die this Saturday. So, pretty much that's the calculation, if you die this Saturday, you can retire. Are there any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry.
One of the questions, doctor, is how do you approach talking money when your spouse is anxious about money?
That is a fantastic question. So the way we approach anxiety, just in anxiety disorders treatment in general is through exposures, believe it or not. So one way to do this is to find a way to introduce the subject as something that I really don't know much about. We both do not know much about, but we are going to figure it out together. And I know it is scary for you, it is scary for me, but we need to find a way to muddle through this. And then maybe leave it there, and then revisit this in a week. Because people get overwhelmed very quickly and very easily. If you catch the person, on a Friday afternoon and are like, okay, let's do this family budget. Chances are you're not going to be very successful. So it has to be a strategic, slow, very small steps conversation that is very non-judgmental. It is not pointing fingers. It is not like, you spend $500 on golf clubs and, I'm saving from bananas. It has to be in a way very collaborative, and we need to figure out a way of how to do this together as family. Hard work though. Just please break it into small bites. It's not something that will be resolved once again.
And then they're asking if you can clarify what exactly is after choice overload?
What the overload?
After choice,
Oh, did
like after you buy, I'm trying to think if that was one of the slides.
Yes, I do have it here. Let me go back. It was here. Choice overload. Too many options can lead to decision paralysis or poor, less informed choices. This is on slide, I think, 31. This is sort of what you described, right? I mean, there are sometimes so many options that you don't know what to do. The retirement plans are an example of this. There are 6 or 7 different numbers of those 401s, 403s, 437s. That, people look at this and they're like, oh, no, I don't know what to do with that. That they just, choose to not put anyone in retirement because it is like too much. This is the decision paralysis when, you're so intimidated by the fact that you don't know anything about this, that you just, shut the computer and you're like, I am not going to do the work. The advice here again is to break it into the very small bite-sized pieces. If you have to learn, one thing per month, chances are in a year, you're going to know a whole lot more than, where you started. If we're talking about items, things that you buy, this can also be difficult. People spend a lot of time, let's say shopping for clothes, for shoes, for furniture. I would bring that down to values. I mean, what is really important for you? Do you want to have an expensive pair of sneakers? Do you want to just have sneakers to use to walk? Why are we making such a big deal out of it, one way or another? Are we wanting to buy something cheap, however it's going to look fancy for the peers? I mean, really values work of why are you choosing to spend time? And as I started by saying that time is not renewable, it's the only resource that we once wasted is wasted. So why are we choosing to waste this precious resource, on this particular item? And this is a good question. I kind of just jumped over this slide. This paralysis is very common. this is exactly, unfortunately, one of the reasons why people would, oftentimes, let's say, choose fast food, because it is easier, and you know how it looks like. You know where to buy it, you know it's cheap, you just go with it, and done. As compared to, having to, let's say, go to Whole Foods and you get, 20 different options there, you're like, no. And we all get overwhelmed. We all get tired at the end of the day, and our ability to make choices, gets to be limited after 5 o'clock. So that's why we do not have that conversation, with the spouse, after 5 o'clock.